everybody for joining us today. I'm Sophie Lavoie, and I'm the person who's coordinating the Feminist Lunch series this year. The Feminist Lunch series this year is co-sponsored by the Faculty of Arts at UNB, the Gender and Women's Studies program, and the UNB Stu University Women's Center. And I'm a representative of a couple of those groups. And we're really happy to be starting off our Winter 2021 series with our speaker today, who's Lisa Ann Ross. It's been a long time coming because Lisa is one of the speakers who got canceled when COVID hit us a year ago. She was supposed to be giving us a presentation in person and unfortunately it got pushed back, but we're really happy 1 year later to be having her with us today and to be able to share her talk with us. So if you don't know Lisa, Lisa Ann Ross teaches theater and directs performances at St. Thomas University. She's also the artistic producer of Solo Chicken Productions and the co-artistic director of The Coop, which is an amazing new initiative by Solo Chicken that aims to create opportunities for professional and emerging New Brunswick artists, including Indigenous artists. And if you haven't seen some of their productions, they've been doing them online, and they're doing such a great job. Lisa studied at Dellarte University. She also studied in California at the Dellarte International School of Physical Theater, and as well as at York University, where she got her MA in theater as a tool for social change. Not something I know a little bit about, and I'm hoping you'll give us a few hints in your talk today, Lisa. I forgot to say we are broadcasting this talk from Willistow territory here in what's now known as New Brunswick, and we're really grateful to be offered this space in order to host this talk on the lands. And so I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. Lisa's going to be talking for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have a question period. So over to you, Lisa.
Oh, thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, it's a year later. I think that we all went dark on March 9th, and my talk was supposed to be like on March 12th or something. So there was we pressed pause, but it's wonderful to be back. So in the last week, as I was kind of mulling over what I was going to talk about, I went back to what I told Sophie I was going to talk about, because I was like, what is it that I said to Sophie that I was going to say? And apparently today, you're going to join theater artist Lisa Ann Ross, that's me, on a fun romp, examining my past and present artistic creations and how my relationship with feminism has flourished and evolved in the creative sphere. I really shot for the moon there with that one. So it's been a really interesting opportunity for me because I would consider myself primarily a practitioner, not necessarily an academic. So I always enjoy moments when I can pause and look at my practice through maybe an academic, and in this case, a theoretical feminist lens. So I've enjoyed the opportunity to kind of look at my own practice. So thank you, Sophie, for this chance. So I think the main question for me has been, so how has my relationship to feminism, how has my feminist practice evolved, and how has that gone hand in hand with my own artistic practice? So I guess that's what I'm going to talk about. And I keep coming back to something. I was talking to my mom, who is on this call, of course, because we're talking about feminism. So I had to invite my mom. And she's a feminist scholar, but we'll talk about that later. And I was sort of saying to her that I don't think that my work as an artist, that my feminism wasn't necessarily conscious. It was inherent in my practice, if that makes sense. So okay, so I'm gonna go back and I'm just gonna talk about 3 different periods in my artistic practice and look at 3 different shows that go with those periods that I performed that I think really are representative of this journey through my life and my evolving relationship with feminism. So let's go way, way back to the beginning. And I guess even before my artistic practice began, it's important to say that I grew up with a feminist mom in a feminist household. And I think that, so right from jump, feminism has always been inherent for me. It's just woven into the fabric of my life. And so when I began my journey, like leaving the home, and as Sophie mentioned, I started my education at Dellarte University. And I'll say, hopefully, I mean, while I learned a lot at Dellarte University, I would say that most of my practice, both as a feminist and as an artist, is in counterpoint to what I did at Dellarte. It was a conservatory style training that doesn't really exist anymore. It was very patriarchal. Most of the works that I read and performed were by white, straight men. And at that time, it was the early 90s. And I don't feel like, even though I was a young feminist woman, I didn't have the language to necessarily push back against that at that time. I just found it deeply discomforting, and the practice didn't sit well with me. And so as soon as I graduated, I did what, all young graduates of theater programs are supposed to do. I auditioned for things, and I worked for a number of really wonderful theater companies, TNB included, and Mermaid Theater and in Nova Scotia. And, I did work like that, but I think in my core, I knew that wasn't the practice for me. That wasn't going to be my journey. And so at some point in the 90s, I was turned on to this school in the States called the Dellarte School of Physical Theater. And at that time, I really didn't know anything about the practice of physical theater, but I trusted this person, and it sounded like it would really be interesting to me. So I took a plunge. And I traveled across the country with my little backpack, and I went to this school, and it was revolutionary, I will say. So this school, in direct opposition to Dalhousie, the Dellarte School teaches popular theater forms, so clown and mask, and it is very much the actor as creator, as opposed to the actor as a hanger for the work of others. And it teaches popular theater forms, which is essentially creating work for the people, by the people. And I was really moved by not only the opportunity to get to be at the center of creation and for creation to flow from me, but to create work that was relevant and of the now. And so I really responded to this work. And as kind of like a little aside, I don't want to go too deep into this, but when I went to the school, clown was one of the things that we were going to be doing. And I'm sure most of you don't know a whole lot about clown beyond maybe Ringling Brothers, but I certainly didn't know anything about it. And a lot of people had come to the school to study clown, and I was like, oh, whatever, clown, schmown. And then we got to the clown unit, and I was like, oh, this is profound work. And I will say that clown practice is what then when I left Dellarte, I went to Toronto to continue my clown studies, which sounds super weird, doesn't it, to a bunch of academics? You're like, continue your clown studies. What does that even mean? It means what it sounds like. I'm running around in a dirty studio with a bunch of dirty costumes, pigeon poop on them, like finding myself. That's essentially what I was doing. So I did. I moved to Toronto, and I started a theater company called Clown Hall with a bunch of clowns. But I think what was so profound about clown practice, about that work, is that it is deeply, deeply personal. And it is all about the impulses of the person who is creating. And so it was really at that time that I think my work became really knitted together with my feminist self, because the work I was generating was coming from my deep personal impulses. It was a really exciting time, and the work was, my work became really queer, it became really feminist, it was bawdy, it was funny, and what I loved about it was that it pushed boundaries of what society thought women should be in performance, which I had really bucked against at Dellarte and afterwards. I'm not an ingenue. So for those of you who don't know what an ingenue is, it's sort of the female lead who wears the flowing gown. And though I wanted to be an ingenue, I wasn't. So if you're not an ingenue, you're going to be cast as a bat and a rat, which if you look at my resume, my early years are populated with bats, rats, and cats. So for me, it was profound to be at the center of creation because it meant I got to be who I really was. And then I was part of a community that we were all making work like this. Sophie, can we share my first clip? It's from a show. It's really ridiculous. I just want you to all know that it's really ridiculous. It's from a show I created in like 2002 with my clown partner, Aaron Boovy. It's called Twatsy, which tells you a little something. It's about two failed jazz dancers who come back from New York and are sleeping on the couch of their manager from Tim Hortons. But it's a real reflection of the kind of work we were creating at the time, where it's like vulnerable, but very like body and like a lot of vaginas, really. That's all I can say. So let's watch it. It's really silly.
Okay, just to confirm, that's the Yoni Cabaret clip?
Yeah. And if it can start at like around 2:18,
yeah,
because there's a lot of screaming that you don't.
Somebody could just confirm that they can see the screen here.
Yes.
Okay, and if I make it big, is it big for you?
Oh,
is it big?
I think it disappeared.
Oh no. All right, just give me a second.
I know, the sharing. I can relive it for you if we can't play the clip, but you know.
I can make it as big as I can so that I don't have to share it. It should work. See if I can do this. All right, sorry, it's going to be small, but we'll go from there.
I can't see it. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, let me try again. I can do this in class for some reason, but I can't do it here.
No, it's the way.
They were ready to go. See. Okay. One minute. Thanks everybody for your patience. All right, it's not showing up for me anymore. It's like my window has disappeared. Sorry about that.
That's okay. You know what? I can. Well, okay. You know what? Well, we'll just move on. Oh, that's okay. I wish I knew. I wish I knew how to use. Oh well, maybe I can do it. Hold on a second here. Do you want me to try?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see here. So. Let me just go to here. Back to here. Okay, let's try this. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right, let's see. Oh, hold on. Just gonna go forward so you don't have to see all.
There's no sound though, Lisa. We can't hear you, Lisa. Sorry.
Okay, now how do I get out of here?
We couldn't actually hear any of the music or anything, Lisa, so if you could just explain. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, hold on. Let me come back to you. Let's see. Oh, can you see me again?
No, you're still sharing your screen. You just have to unshare your screen.
Unshare. Okay, well, you couldn't hear the audio?
No, sorry.
Oh, it's just me screaming and running around in a costume. Okay, well, so this work is like, yeah, you really have to see it. So it's deeply rooted in clown, and in clown, the relationship between the characters, it's called a Joey and a Goose. So the characters always they have this sort of desire to be with each other all the time, and also a desire to be away from each other all the time. And so it was rooted both in this kind of like completely body out there relationship with the vagina, and then also this like strange intimate relationship between women. And so, well, it's too bad you couldn't see the clip, but it's so that was really the beginning, I would say, of my yeah, I can send you guys a link to it afterwards. Yeah, I'll send I'd be happy to share the link and you can watch it. You can watch the whole weird thing. It's pretty funny. So that was the beginning, I would say, of my feminist artistic practice. Really, it was really wild. It was open. It was quite free, and there were no limits. So I think then what I'll do is I'll jump forward to what I'll call the mom years, and I'll say that to talk about this show that I created, a solo show about motherhood called Engorged, which Sophie, you've seen. Yeah, I think that's when we really met. Maybe you came to see it and you contacted me afterwards. So motherhood can be a disorienting and strange experience. And for me, the act of balancing motherhood with being an artist was challenging, because both require your total attention, and they require different kinds of total attention. So motherhood requires all your attention to go towards another person, and artists are all about the attention going inward. So there's like, there's always this sort of challenging interplay there. And so, there was some inner turmoil, but there was also a maturation of self that was happening, right? I was growing up quite rapidly. And so my work, I think at that time, became more mature, became more focused, more pointed. And if my early work was all about like challenging societal norms, through wild feminist performance art, this period was more about using creation to build sort of a sense of unity or connection. So to go a little bit further into that point, I think one of the challenges for me in motherhood was discovering that there was a lot of anti-feminist rhetoric that sprung directly from women themselves, from other mothers towards other mothers. There was this whole like, I'm a better middle-class, white, middle-aged mother than you are. This was sort of the time of the early blogging mommy with these very like, sort of gauzy women with, non-stained dresses, feeding their children organic food. And it was all so perfect and wonderful and such bullshit. And I felt like there was this strange competitiveness, and something that I, like in my early work, I was always surrounded by this wonderful bubble of creative people who thought alike, and then I kind of emerged out into the wide world, and I found that very discomforting. And so I feel like my work at this time was a sort of a response to that, right? Wanting to create a sort of sense of unity and olive branch, a place where people could laugh about the ridiculous of motherhood and be honest about it, and also while still honoring it. And so I created this solo show, Engorged, which touches back on my early work. It's like it's a one-woman cabaret, so I play the host and I play all the characters in the cabaret. And I wonder, do you think, Sophie, do you think I wonder if that clip will work, or maybe we shouldn't even bother because it's 12. Let's just skip it.
The share window of my browser is not even showing up in the share options anymore. I'm really sorry, Lisa.
It's okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'll send some clips. People can watch them if they want. So I found this work at this time. It was really cathartic. And one of the sort of unintended, very positive consequences of this work, of this time of creating this show, was that my feminist icon and I got to work together, and it created this very magical feeling of having come full circle in my life. And my feminist icon, of course, is my mom. So it happened that during the time that I was creating my solo show, my mom's academic focus had really shifted to motherhood. And so she convinced me to apply to present my work at a few different academic conferences, which I wouldn't have probably done, because as primarily as an artist, I always think about presenting my work in theaters in the artistic sphere. But she said, you should come, because in fact, she was going to a motherhood conference in New York, and she's like, your work would be perfect there. So I got to take this show and hang out with my mom in New York and perform it in front of my mom as she was getting ready to then go on and give her own talk. So it was a really special sort of full circle kind of feminist moment. And, you know, since we're having an academic talk, I thought I should bring in the big guns and ask my mom, Dr. Linda Ross, if she would say a few words about that experience of the academic and personal worlds colliding. May I introduce my feminist icon, Dr. Linda Ross? Oh, you have to unmute yourself. Oh, you're muted again. The magic of Teams. There you go.
Oh, all right. So your feminist icon, isn't that great with technology, right? Well, thank you for inviting me to share in this session with you today. Your passion never ceases to amaze me. It's just delightful. So you asked me to talk a little bit about the intersection of my personal and academic experiences. And as I noticed, some of my earlier colleagues are on the line there. And as you know, I'm a psychologist. I completed my PhD in psychology at the University of New Brunswick. And I was an older student when I came back. I had two teenagers, one of which is now talking to you. And there was some synchronicity there, because while I was doing my PhD, my daughter Lisa was just starting her bachelor's degree at Dalhousie University. So we were both students at the same time. Now, as a psychologist and having studied psychology, I've always been somewhat at odds with the discipline, primarily as a consequence of its tendency to try and simplify complex issues, and to largely ignore those broad social, economic, gendered, and political contexts that inform and shape people's lives. And I think those are some of the things you're talking about in your practice as a theater artist. And these omissions, to me and to a lot of feminist scholars, are fundamental to understanding human behavior. And like Lisa, I feel like I've always been a feminist scholar. There isn't a point at which I thought, yes, I'm adopting a feminist lens to look at the world. And I think partly it was a consequence of growing up in the 50s and 60s, and possibly more important, growing up with four brothers. I feel like I've always been a feminist. And aside from having those four brothers, I think I've always been inspired by the ways in which inequity and inequality impose on and inform everybody's experiences. But because I'm interested in women, I see them focused on women's experiences. So once I graduated from the psychology department, I found my academic place in women's and gender studies in the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies at Athabasca University. And in that space, I was able to develop and teach courses focused on issues that were of particular relevance to women. And things, for example, violence against women, the psychology of women, women in health, women in work. And because I was a psychologist, I was able to steward the Counseling with Women program. And being in women's and gender studies also gave me the freedom to do the kind of research that I wanted to be doing, and research into issues that might not have been so easily pursued within a traditional psychology department. And so again, I see some parallels with what you were saying, Lisa, about traditional theater and your movement into clown work. So one of those kind of not so easily pursued in a psychology department area, a case in point, was motherhood studies. And as Lisa said, I mean, we were both, I think, coming into this at about the same time. And so it was in that space, that motherhood space, that my academic and personal spheres really started to gel and collide. And I think collided in somewhat unique ways. I was able to develop courses focused on mothering, teach mothering courses, do research in that area, go to conferences, publish, write books in motherhood studies. And it kind of as a little aside, sharing kind of ideas and experiences that one feels passionate about, and I certainly feel passionate about my academic work, with other like-minded individuals can be very fulfilling. But being able to share those same passions with my daughter has been in the past and continues to be a real sense of joy for me. There were times in the past when Lisa and I attended conferences together. She came to see my sessions, or I went to her performances, and all of those sorts of things brought joy. And Lisa mentioned her work with Engorged. When I worked for a number of years with the Motherhood Museum, the Museum of Motherhood in New York City, and was delighted to be able to invite Lisa to come and perform there. And the following year, when I was the chair of the section on women in psychology, so the SWAP group with the Canadian Psychological Association, and we were co-organizing a conference, the pre-conference workshop focused on mothering and motherhood. Lisa, again, was invited to perform. And I think it would be no exaggeration, and I know Carmen is online here and she'll probably concur with this. And so I'm not just saying this as her mom, but Lisa was the star performance at both events. The accolades were amazing. Now, at the Museum of Motherhood conferences, there's always been a blend of academic and artistic performance. But it was, I think, somewhat of a revelation to bring performance into a psychology conference. And it was met with some resistance up front, but once it was done, everybody agreed it was amazing. So now in retirement, mine, not Lisa's, I'm delighted to be able to continue working with you on the board of Solo Chicken Productions, as Lisa mentioned, as a participant in the weekly Spirit Project sessions, and hopefully in future as a costume designer for your performances. And I know Carmen's here, and I would just like to say in closing that Dr. Carmen Poulin, who is now a close friend of mine, was an influential professor for me and a feminist mentor. So while I was a student at UNB some years ago. So alongside of all of the academic interests and experiences that Lisa and I have shared, that I've been privileged to share with Lisa, it now seems very special to me that Lisa is currently working with Carmen in creative projects. So I'll leave it there.
Oh, thank you, Mom. That's nice. I only paid her a little bit for the
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really wonderful opportunity to have the personal and the practice come together. It was very, very meaningful, that experience. And I will share the clip of Engorged if people want to watch it. So I see we're pardon me, at about 12:30, and I know we want to wrap up and take some questions. So maybe I'll just conclude by saying, you know, the last few years of my practice, again, I think it's always in counterpoint or in response to something, but I will call these the pig years, because sort of in response to He Who Shall Not Be Named, and we no longer need to care about selection in 2016, you know, we saw a real outpouring of vitriol against really anyone who wasn't a straight white male, basically. So I was really overwhelmed and devastated, as I'm sure all of you were too. And so my work in the last few years, my personal work, it kind of was the feminism was reinvigorated, and I worked with visual artist Danielle Hogan, and I created a piece called Pig, which basically what we wrote in the grant was that we wanted to create beauty from shit. So we took a whole bunch of shit that He Who Shall Not Be Named said, and other, you know, people who are people of no consequence, and we took their vitriol and we sort of transformed it into objects of beauty and characters of beauty. And I'll say that was also a really rewarding project, deeply rooted, I would say, in even theoretical feminist practice. And that project is continuing today. When that project concluded with Danielle and I, we loved what we'd created. I can share some of that with you too. And I think our big takeaway was that as white middle-class women, our voices were only resounding like a fraction of the voices. And so we've opened the project now up and invited a number of artists to join in this process of transforming shit into beauty. And we're really looking forward to hearing this chorus of voices and exploring that kind of feminist practice from multiple perspectives. So that's sort of where I am now. So I guess, yeah, that just to sum it up, I really feel like my journey as a feminist has gone hand in hand with my journey as an my journey as an artist. And the growth of those two things have really been intertwined, and they've fed each other. And so I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any questions, I guess.
Thanks so much, Lisa. That was such a great talk. It was interesting to see how the 6 degrees of separation are really operating right now between you, your mom, professors in the UNB psychology department, and of course, as we know, Carmen has been so involved in the Gender and Women's Studies program here at UNB, and in a lot of her feminist work. So I'm glad to see those connections are alive and well. That was a fascinating talk, and thank you, Linda, for participating as well. It was nice to hear from you. I'm left with wanting to know a little bit more about your collaborations. And another connection that we might have in common with the Museum of Motherhood that I'll ask you about when we are one-on-one a little bit more. But I'll open the floor up to questions. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I've put the 3 links to the 3 clips that Lisa wanted to share in the chat. So everybody's welcome to go and see. Okay, Carmen, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa, and hi, Linda. It's a real pleasure, and I'm not going to ask a question, or at least I don't think I will, but I want to just acknowledge what you said, Linda, and I want to tell a story first about Linda. When I remember her asking me to write her letter of reference, and Linda was a couple of years older than me when she started. And of course, now she's a couple of years younger than me, but that's another story. And I remember having the hardest time writing her a reference letter, because it was always like wanting to write about somebody that you felt more akin to as a friend than as a student. And that always caused me some angst because there was no way I could be, I could not talk about something about Linda that had to do with the warmth that I always felt when I was spending time with her or thinking about her. But of course, there was always a lot to talk about because Linda was certainly one of our brilliant students. And I have a couple of colleagues that keep saying that it was the most brilliant defense thesis that they had ever have witnessed. Yeah. And I can tell you who those people were if you're interested. But anyways, so it's been, I was talking just this week. That was the first anecdote I want to say about you, is that you asking me to write letters of reference in the olden days was always a bit of a challenge in terms of how not to get gushy about it at the last paragraph when you get to say something personal. The second, oh, and now I lost, what was it that I wanted to say? Okay, I won't say it now and it'll come back to me, but I will say that after, it was such a gift for me to realize that I could work with Lisa. And Lisa, and it's wonderful when you meet somebody and you like, for instance, in this case, their mother, and then you think, oh, I'm going to meet their daughter. And then you meet their daughter and you think, gosh, amazing, those two are related, But this is not the case when you actually work with those two people. It's obvious that they're related and they both have this amazing energy. What I want to say is that our work, and I say our because, and Lynn's just beside me there, but she's shy and I'm not, so she's been listening throughout. Here, I'm just going to turn a little bit. And what we found so amazing is that the ability to take research, and you've talked about, how it blends, but also for us right now to be able to take research results and that have a lot of social relevance in terms of message with respect to feminism. We're in a collaboration with Lisa, who was actor in residence in our lab last term, yay. And we're trying to get her back there for longer to take results that are socially relevant and deliver them in other kind of modality than the ones that we're so used to, i.e. present an article to a journal and try to get it published so that a couple of people might read it halfway through. But instead, Lisa's worked with us to try to communicate some of the findings that we have with our work with older people, 90 plus years old people. And there's more to come, hopefully, in the future, if we can get the proper funding for also caretakers and issues that are of great concern to feminists, but I think of great concern to society as a whole, and especially that are very relevant at a time of a pandemic where we see the how the age one have been suffering the most of this situation. So your work, Lisa, the social relevance of your work, I totally admire and appreciate. And so thank you for that. And thank you for you, Linda, for your work that has always been also so socially relevant. And I remembered the other part of my anecdote that I wanted to say. Linda said at some point, I need somebody to do a reading course with me. And of course, as she always did, she did all the work. I just sat around and fed her some beer. And during that semester that we did that course together, my mind literally blew up in terms of thinking about work in a different way, which is still today with me in the way that I approach every question that I approach in psychological research. So thank you.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Carmen, for that great comment and for showing that richness of what these conversations can lead to on a larger scale. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments for Lisa? Looking through the list here as I do with my classes. I'm really curious to, besides PIG, what you're working on now, Lisa. What are some of the projects that are coming up? Because now that we're no longer in the Trump era, what's going to happen?
I know. Well, I'm working on a project called Foolish Deeds, which our company was artists in residence at the Playhouse in the summer during the, remember the yellow phase when we could do different things? It was a magical time, the yellow phase. So we started work on this piece that's basically rooted in characters are developed from Greek gods and goddesses, monsters and titans, and the sort of creative prompt is what happens when you spend too much time alone. A nod to our current situation, but without becoming a play about COVID, because nobody really needs to see that. So we're working on, we developed a bunch of solos in the summer, and I'm working with Theatre St. Thomas students right now, continuing that, and maybe you will see a sneak peek of this in the summer. So it's a really fun, very much in the Coop style. It's sort of a fusion of physical theater and a little bit of contemporary dance, sort of non-traditional, like sort of doesn't have a clear narrative. Lots of imagery and strangeness, and I'm really enjoying working on that. And then I've been working on the Spirit Project. We've been working on that for the past couple of years, and my mom mentioned she's volunteering. So the Spirit Project is in partnership with L'Arche, and I didn't talk about this at all in my talk, but my work has two distinct sort of veins. I work as like sort of a professional artist, and then I do community collaboration or community arts practice. And both I do sort of in equal amounts. I find, again, they just like feminism and art, community practice and professional practice really feed each other. So we've been working in community with adults with intellectual disabilities. We come together each week in a creative space and we make things together. So we've essentially formed a company and we're working towards building a show called Portraits of Me. And I love this work so much. Every time I'm in the studio with this remarkable group of people, I learn so much about myself as a human being, as an artist. L'Arche's mandate is to reveal the gifts of adults with intellectual disabilities. And I feel like this is what happens each week in the Spirit Project. And through the process, then I get to learn a lot about myself. So that's been just brilliant and amazing. So those are sort of the two big things that we're working on. And then, yeah, PIG is continuing. I can share if anybody's interested, because we really just kicked that off again, and a whole bunch of really interesting artists from across North America. I have some from the States as well who are working. So their bios are going up and then their pieces are going to start. They're all making small, beautiful things for us. And so I can share that because I think the work is quite interesting, and we have some really interesting artists who've joined the project. So thanks again, Sophie, for having me. It was really fun to talk about my work. Nobody ever lets you just talk about yourself.
No, we're really glad to have had you. I'll just do one more round to see if there's any other last questions or comments from anyone. We have some thank yous in the chat that you can go and read afterwards. Well, I really want to thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Linda, for participating. It was really interesting as somebody who's very interested in the theater of the oppressed and theater for social change myself. I'm fascinated by some of the things you do, as you know. We want to invite you to our next Feminist Lunch series. It's continuing on February 10th. You can have that to look forward to. Erin Fredericks from STU Sociology is going to be talking to us about health discourse, and QAnon. So look out for the poster for that, which will be circulating very soon. And if you go to the UNB STU University Women's Center on Facebook, you'll receive the invitations to the event, or I'll send them through the normal veins. Through the university email system as well. I just want to thank Daniel Grant, who's our tech support for this series, who's very helpful in setting up all of these Teams meetings. Thank you very much, Daniel. And I hope to see you all again on February 10th for Erin Frederick's talk. Thanks again, Lisa, and virtual claps, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Karen.